where I'm just going to get right into it. So just a couple slides to get started, and then we'll do a little demonstration on what we've got to share for today. So a brief recap. What is SOCKETWorx for the uninitiated? What we're dealing with here is it's a web-based portal for viewing and editing database records and PDFs. So I'm going to be using a P&ID drawing for the data for this webinar that's connected to a database, but it doesn't have to be P&ID data. It could be really anything, just anything, any kind of database that exists, you can connect into SOCKETWorx, or you could socket into it, hence the name. So on top of this ability to edit records and PDFs inside the browser, we can also manage data sheets. That's what we'll talk about today. Any kind of equipment or process data sheets you want. We've got a full lifecycle management for data sheets in there. We can also do things with material lifecycle management, project management of change, and specification control. The ability to dole out specs to customers or your clients or invested parties. We can do that as well. So there's a lot more things we can do with the application. We'll just touch on data sheets today. And here's a quick just intro on what we're going to cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an existing Excel data sheet that's just on my computer, and I'm going to port it to the web, right? And there's just to break it down, I've got a couple process data sheets and a couple equipment data sheets, but I'm going to focus on these two. I've got a PI/PIT data sheet, and I've got a PD pump data sheet. I'll import both, and we'll play around with the records and see what it looks like. On top of that, so once we import it, then we'll take a look at the datasheet table view. So that's going to be inside the browser. We'll take a look at the data in a grid form that we're going to populate onto the datasheet. And we can also edit the data at that time as well. We'll take a look at some naming conventions. So how does the datasheet, whenever you export it out, what is the name that's applied to the datasheet? That can be programmatically generated. We'll take a look at revision control. So we have a work in progress revision that is default that we've built into the program, as well as the ability to progress a revision, go to revision 1 and so on, look back at recent revisions, and very easily see what was changed in between those different revisions. And then we'll talk about exporting data from your data sheets and importing data from data sheets. So here's kind of there's only two windows I'm going to pop in between for this webinar. I've got AutoCAD open, and I've also got my web browser open and this PowerPoint. But here's kind of what I'm going to do to set this up. So I've already got a P&ID that's been created, but that would be your first step if you were doing this from scratch. You got to create your P&ID. It has to be connected to a database, and if you wanted to create it from scratch without modifying the fields, you could append database fields to the records later on, or you could do it when you first create the database itself. After you do that, and you've got some drawings that are populated, and you're starting to collect data inside these drawing files, then we can go over to SOCKETWorx and start to edit our datasheet templates. So here's where I create an actual datasheet inside the browser. So you import your Excel datasheet, and then you start to link these fields, the fields that you created in the first step, to cells. So when I say field, I'm talking about the database itself. The database has a collection of fields and tables. And when I say cells, the cells are like Excel cells. So you have to tell the program what field is mapped to what cell. Once that's created, then you can just apply the datasheet to your records. So you highlight multiple rows, and basically you say, okay, these records are associated with this datasheet. And then at the same time, we can start to look at the naming convention for the datasheet as well. Give it a certain name that's consistent across all the datasheets you create. And then it's time to process. So you can basically highlight cells, export the data sheets, start to change the revisions, start to actually edit the data here. And since we're working with a database, these steps are all really connected, right? So the P&ID itself will get updated with any data that I edit here in the browser. So we're going to demonstrate that so you can see that whole workflow. But at a high level, those 4 steps is what we'll cover. This won't take too long. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo. So first step, I'm going to show you the P&ID, and I want to show you that it is connected to SOCKETWorx already. So I'm going to just minimize my screen. And I believe I shared the screen, right? Brian, can you see the AutoCAD window I've got open?
Sure can, bud.
All right, perfect. Great. So I'm connected to a database currently. This is just one of many P&IDs that's inside this project. If I do a file open, there's like a dozen and a half P&IDs here. So I just attack the first one, PID 1000, right? Just to keep it simple. So this has a vessel, and it has some PIs here. It's got some blank PIs as well, and TIs. What I'm going to do is just do a sync here, so you can see that it is connected to a database. Yes, sync, only takes a second. All right. Any records that were changed in the backend in the database will get updated here. I'm going to go to the browser real quick. And this is the front end for SOCKETWorx. So we're going to go after these blank ones first, the TI and the PI that's blank. So I'm going to go to my instruments table. You can see I'm connected to this this database called G Upstream Facility Demo, G for George. And here's all the different tables inside the database itself. And you can see all the different records that have been applied. It's just a very simple rollup, basically. But I'm just going to click in this purple triangle here, or rectangle, go to PID Instruments. And I've created a view that just shows the PIs and the PITs. Actually, anything that starts with PI is shown here. So there's a controller here as well. I can sort by function. I can sort by tag. I can see my blank tag is right here for that PI. So before I go any further, I'm just going to make an edit here. Let's call that 1024. Save changes, all in the browser. So it's a full front end. There's nothing for me to touch in the back end on the database itself. So I've made an edit. Okay, I'm going to go back to the P&ID, and I'm just going to do a sync again, and then watch what happens to this PI when I sync. PI 1024. So the only thing we're trying to do here is to prove that this is connected. This P&ID is connected to a database, and it's the same database here that I'm looking at in the browser. So typically your designer, right, would be looking at this window. He would be actually applying the PIs here in this space. And then over here, this would be like an engineer or a project manager. He would be modifying this information. Everything that's associated to this data bubble, right, all this additional data, I'm just teeing up these same fields, these same records here inside the browser. So instead of rows here, you see the columns across. And then this is across all of my P&IDs, all of my different drawings, not just the 1000. Cool. So tell you what, I'm just going to do this, copy. Let's make a couple more PIs. Paste, paste. Okay. Those are going to be blank. I'll go ahead and change the attribute layer. I'll go ahead and sync again. So those new records that are blank should now be part of SOCKETWorx here. And if I do a refresh, I should see those PIs as well. And there they are, those two that are blank, right? So now I can come in here and change the tag. Let's say the designer didn't know the tag. It'd be easy for me to come in as the engineer and then modify the tag itself. So now that that's been proven that that works, let's talk about the data sheets. So you'll notice on each of these records, there's 3 icons. There's DS, DOC, and PDF. So I can associate a data sheet, documents, or a PDF to one of these records. I'm going to work on the data sheets. So there's a back end here. I'm just going to click on my name here at the top. I'm logged in, and I'll go to Setup. In fact, it's a browser, so I'm just going to duplicate the tab that I'm working with. so I don't save my view, I don't lose my view that's right here, and then I'll just go to setup on this other tab. I've gone to setup, and I've got some settings here. We're just going to attack the datasheet templates. So I'll click on that. So you can see there's 2 here already. I just did a little practice for this webinar. I've created a couple, but I want to show you one from scratch. So I'm going to hit the plus here that says add datasheet template. And the first thing it asks you is what table do you want to make the template off of? So I'm going to do a PIT template first. So that's going to be part of my instruments table. So I'll select that. The name says datasheet template new. So I'm going to double click this. Let's call this pressure indicator R1. Save. All right, now let's edit the actual data sheet. I'll click this little grid here, and it comes up as blank. So you don't have to recreate the data sheet from scratch. What's very nice is I can actually just import a already completed data sheet and then just change, the little things that I want to change, little formatting steps and things like that. So there's a list of icons here at the top. I'm going to hit the 4th one. The 4th one lets me import a data sheet. And I've got a data sheet here, group pressure indicator. I'm going to click on this one. And it says, do you want to add the data from the file to actual data or discard all your data and load the data? I'll say add. Great. So this is my tab that was added, instrument data sheets. And I can see it. I've got a name here. It kind of looks like an Excel, and like an Excel page, and it is really. It's just an Excel page inside the browser. So I'm going to increase my zoom level a little bit and start to put in a couple fields, connect a couple fields to this thing. So I can see that there's a couple formatting things that I want to fix, like these aren't merged across. I'll go ahead and fix that. And this is a revision, fix that. There was a picture here, that's why that's blank. We can fix that as well. That looks pretty good. Actually, I could delete these too. I only need 1 row here for rev. Oh, I think I did 1 step too many. Let me go back. All right, let me import that again. I think I messed up. I think I deleted too many rows there. So let me do this one more time. System, client, and revision. Okay. No messing around. Let's just go forward, right? So I'm gonna put in all my fields first. So at the top, I've got a button here that says show field selection, clear field, and then there's a delete and then a refresh. I'm gonna click show field selection to start. So I go to show field selection, and I've got 3 options here on the right-hand side. This little pane just activated. I can either assign an existing database field. I can assign a static field, which is like a field that I created just for this project, or I can assign a special field. Special fields are like free form fields, which is basically just a any field that you could put whatever data you want into it. The actual revision number that we control from our revision system, or the date that the actual thing was issued. So I'm going to go to static first. I've actually uploaded an image here for the EC logo, and I'm going to place it there. So I'll say select. So it gets populated with this little acronym. That's the static field that's been applied. I've got one for project number, so I'll select that. The drawing number is an assigned field from the database. So I'll just search for DWG, and I'll put that in. The system, I'm not sure if I have one for system. Oh yeah, I do. There it goes. I'll put that in. The client, that's typically a static field. I just put in Acme Company. I could set this to be whatever I want. Right now, the field isn't editable, so every time I export the data sheet, I can't change it, but I could change what that default value is for the project. And then revision, so I'll assign special, I'll give it a revision number. I'll do the same thing here, give it a issue date, give it a description. checked by, CH, checked by. Nope, I have to select a field. Give me a little warning. And then approved by. I think my formatting's a little big there. I'll just zoom that back up. Well, maybe not. And then I'll go and enter in the rest, right? So description, size, line number, instrument type. Some of these records I don't have fields for, but most I do. So let me keep going. I'm going to do description next. Oh, I have to select it. Size. Right there. Instrument type. Let's see what I got. I have IO type. I'll try to use that one. See how that works. Manufacturer. That's usually MFR. Select it. Model number. Almost done. Serial number. Vendor. I don't think I have vendor, but let me check. Vendor. Oh, I do have vendor. Okay. Select that. And let's do line number as well. So you get the process. You select the field, you select the cell, and you're telling the program what database goes in what field. I don't like that. I'm actually going to delete this or clear that field. Yeah, that's better. I don't know why that formatting got messed up. Oh, it's like size 16. That's why. Let's change that to 11 or 10. Yeah, let's do this again. Checked by. Yeah, that's better. That was just too big before. Okay, now that that's done, I have to save. So I'll go ahead and save. I could export out just like a work in progress revision just to see what the whip would look like. So that's the default one. If you want to see on the right-hand side what I started with, and on the left-hand side, this is what I would end up with. And it really just shows me what's been assigned a field. So this is like your QA step to say, okay, here's what I'm actually going to pull from the database when I create each of these data sheets. Okay, so that's done. It looks good. I'm going to save it again. I think I already did, but I did it one more time. I'll go ahead and close. It'll confirm that I've closed. I can go ahead and change my zoom level back to something that looks a little bit better. And I'm complete. That's my pressure indicator R1. I'll do the same thing for the PD pump next, but let's go ahead and apply this new data sheet to some records. So I'll go back to my other page. I didn't move off this page. I just cloned the tab. So here I can go, actually I'll just do a refresh real quick. Why not? Just refresh the page. Anything that's a PI or a PIT, I can just sort by function real quick to do this. I want to apply this data sheet to. So I've got a PIC I don't want to apply it to. And then I'll go to the DS button at the top. I'll say assign template. I've got the original one I did before the webinar, and I got the one I did just now, R1. I'll go ahead and select it. Yep, there it goes. And on the left-hand side, you can see the difference here in the coloring, but it's now got this green shade to it that lets you know that something has been applied. Now it has a datasheet template for that item. And you can click on that item too if you wanted to look at that actual datasheet. But I'm not ready yet. First, I have to apply a naming convention to the datasheet itself. Because if I were to click on this now, oh, yeah, it already came in. Okay, so I do have a convention that's here. This is date dash tag dash the revision, and then just what revision it is, WIP 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go ahead and show you, even though I've set that up, just where I apply that naming convention. So I'm going to go to tables, and then I'll sort by the display name. And here's my instrument table. I'm going to go to my datasheet naming convention. That's what DNSC stands for. And then here's what's been applied. So I had the date dash the tag that came from the database, then dash the letter R, and then the rev. That's what pulled that together. And you can see anything else from that instrument table database, I could also apply. You know, if I wanted to put function in there as well, I could make that part of the convention as well. I don't want to do that though, but just in the back end, that's what's going on with the convention. So now that I've applied data sheets, let's talk about revving the data sheets. And then we'll talk about changing the data as well once we do revisions. So let me pick on just some of that 1000 level. Here's that 1024 one I modified earlier. Here's the WIP datasheet. And if I click on revisions here, there aren't any revisions that I've created so far. So I'm going to modify some data and create a revision of this data itself. So first thing is let's just create just Rev1, right? So here's the WIP data where I could make modifications, but I want to create my actual like Rev1 here. So I'm going to close. Let's highlight this guy and say datasheet, issue revision. And I have an option. I can issue the revision only, or issue a revision and then insert a copy of the existing revision into the document table. So this little document button would highlight with its associated revision. I'm just going to issue the revision for now. Give that a second. It says success. So now if I go back to that record and I look at the datasheet revisions, I can now load revision 1. So here is revision 1 from the server. You can see that the fields are no longer highlighted, right? Because this is the one that you're actually going to send to someone, the latest revision itself. I could save the records or make some edits here if I wanted to. I'm going to actually just export this guy out so we can take a look at it. You can see my picture came through, right? And anything I added to the database is also coming through as well. So there are some fields here that are blank. So let's talk about editing the data from the web browser so these will populate. What's missing? Like description, the serial number, and the vendor. That wasn't populated from the database. So I can very easily go in here and just make those changes. I'm going to go to close, and then I'm just going to hit this edit button. This is going to make that same view I was just looking at show up in kind of this Excel view. So you could either highlight everything here, copy it, paste it to Excel, make your changes, and then import it. Or you could just make the changes right here inside the browser. Let's say these are all Ashcroft. I'll pop those. And let's give it a serial number. And let's give it a vendor. My vendor. And actually had some missing tags here. Let me fix that as well. Go ahead and save changes. And then we'll close. So I can see the data has been updated here. Now when I create a data sheet, oh, actually I can issue a revision now, right? So that's what I could do. Data sheet, issue another revision, issue the revision only. I think I did 1024 originally. Yeah, let me issue a revision on that one. Now I've got Rev 1 and I've got Rev 2. So if I load Rev 1, we'll get to see what the data looks like, right? Those fields are blank, right? Because it didn't exist in Rev 1. Now if I load Rev 2, whatever was actually changed is highlighted. So the revision is highlighted, and then these two fields is what I pulled in or what I actually added. So now if I exported this guy out, this is going to look a little bit different. And you can see the naming conventions applied as well. So now it's R2 for this record. Let's wait for Excel to load. And then there we go. So I've got R1 and I've got R2. And we very plainly show you, hey, check it out. This is what changed. So there we go. Now that that's done and proven to work, what I could do is I could go through and check all my datasheet records, check all the data, make sure it's accurate. I could globally just go and issue a revision for everything and say, hey, this is the current revision. And then I could export this, right? So what the export does is it just sends you, the logged in user, an email with all of these data sheets. And if you want anyone else to be a part of that, you can just CC them in as well. Here you go, Brian. I'll send you some data sheets. Have fun with those.
Thanks, George.
You're welcome. Yeah, so that's it, right? That's been applied. And everything that I've done here would be exactly the same for equipment as well. But let's take a look at some of our other tables where we've got some pumps applied. I'm going to go to this mechanical table next. And I still want to focus on that one drawing, the 1000 drawing. Actually, I don't see a pump on this P&ID. I don't believe there is one. So tell you what, I'll just add one in real quick. So right now I see, 11 records, okay, in the database. I'm going to go to pumps. And I know this is out here in space, but just to demonstrate that we can add this real quick, I'll give it a tag. I'll say okay. So the tag information is totally blank. I'll go ahead and save it, sync the database, sync with the database, right? Now if I come back here and just hit a refresh, I should see that record show up in this table that I've created for pumps. And there she is, 1000 PID 1000, and then tag is the name. So I'm not going to go through creating the other data sheet for the pump, but let's take a look at what that template looks like. So I'm just going to hit the checkbox and then assign it. So I'll use the one for PD pump. I'll hit select, and then we'll click the data sheet. So for the work in progress data sheet, here's the couple of fields that I've applied, like the job number, the date, the rev that was done by, the status of the pump, the manufacturer, the size, serial number. Literally anything that you're storing in the database, you can show on these data sheets. So there's a couple fields that are missing, and I've set up this grid filter to be those fields that I want to enter in. So again, I can just go into edit, give this guy a tag, my pump. Oh wait, don't change the wrong one. My pump. Okay, it's that last record there. Manufacturer, Griswold. Serial number, 001. Status, that's good. Size, let's say it's actually, let's copy these. Temperature, 70, 120. That's good enough. Go ahead and save the changes. I'll go ahead and issue a revision to this guy. And then I'll go to my data sheet. So since I modified just the WIP revision, when I go to my revisions, I'll only see those changes that I just created when I hit confirm. So things that I was missing is like I didn't find the right field for fluid or for description, and there was no line reference, but most of the other fields came in for me already, right? Like here's the size, and then the manufacturer, and so on. Yep. I'll go ahead and save and close. Great. So once that's been created, I can again export that data sheet out to anyone I want. Cool. So from here, what we've kind of demonstrated is just the ability to control your data from datasheet records, basically. I'm going to go back to the P&ID and then just, I did some modifications on the data side. So now all I have to do is just sync on this side, and I should be able to see those same records here get updated, right? So here is my pump. I can see the data that I filled in here, the manufacturer, the power, the serial number, and so on. And the same thing for those PIs. So those two PIs I added, that additional data came in exactly as I had applied it. Really takes the strain out of creating and managing data sheets, because anything that the designer adds in here, I immediately know that I've got a new element that I need to apply some information to. And then all I have to do is fill out that information and it gets automatically updated as long as you sync. So it's a really slick workflow for sure. Cool. Let's just check the PowerPoint, make sure we've covered everything. We're nearing the end here. So yeah, I think that about covers it. Let's just do a recap of what we did. So after the demo, imported, configured, and applied PI, PIT, and pump data sheets. The data sheets can be concurrent to the live P&ID project data with revisions. The most important step is just having the correct database fields that I was doing with the PI sheet that you saw. So this kind of gives you a reason, right, to look at connecting to a database. This ability now to automate data sheets is a very powerful tool that can save you plenty of time, especially when it comes to managing that data.